There are myths that explain where mountains came from. There are myths that explain the stars. And there are myths that explain why humans eat the foods they do. Tonight's story does all three. It begins with a hunter, a wild boar, and a coconut caught in a tusk. At first glance, it seems like an ordinary folktale. A man finds a coconut, he plants it, a tree grows, but then something impossible happens. Blood falls onto a blossom. 9 days pass, and where there should have been a flower, there is a child. A girl who arrives not from a mother's womb, but from a coconut tree. A girl whose very body produces treasures, jewels, valuables, objects beyond imagination. And because of that gift, she will be feared, she will be envied, and ultimately, she will be murdered. But her death is not the end of the story. In fact, it is only the beginning. Because from her body will come food, from her sacrifice will come life, and from her memory will emerge one of the most important myths of the Maluku Islands of Indonesia. Tonight, Witches and Wanderers, we explore the legend of Hainuwele, the coconut branch, the girl who changed the world. Hello, and welcome back, Witches and Wanderers, to the Morbid Witch Podcast, where we explore myths, legends, folklore, cryptids, deities, spirits, and the darker corners of human storytelling. I'm your host, Kari Murders. Tonight, we're traveling to the island of Seram in Indonesia's Maluku Islands to explore one of the most fascinating creation myths in the world. The story of Hainuwele is unlike many myths we've discussed before. It contains miraculous births, supernatural gifts, betrayal, death, transformation, and the creation of both food and humanity's place within the world. This legend comes from the traditions of the Wemale and Alune peoples and remains one of the most important stories in Indonesian folklore. Anthropologists have studied it extensively, because it offers a rare glimpse into ancient beliefs about agriculture, sacrifice, death, and rebirth. To all my witches and wanderers joining me tonight, thank you for being here. Whether you're listening beneath moonlight, commuting to work, or relaxing with a warm cup of tea, I'm grateful you've chosen to spend your time with me. If you are watching on YouTube, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment. Let me know what mythology you'd like to hear about next. And if you're listening on Spotify, please take a moment to rate the show. It helps more witches and wanderers discover the podcast. You can listen to the Morbid Witch Podcast on Spotify, YouTube, iHeartRadio, and Pandora. Now, let's travel to Seram Island. Before we meet Hainuwele herself, it's worth taking a moment to understand where her story comes from. Seram is the largest island in Indonesia's Maluku province, often called the Spice Islands. For thousands of years, the peoples of this region developed rich oral traditions that explain the world around them and preserve their cultural identity. The Wemale and Alune peoples passed the story of Hainuwele down through generations long before it was ever written down. Like many oral traditions, the story served multiple purposes at once. It entertained audiences, explained natural phenomena, reinforced social values, and preserved sacred cultural knowledge. What makes the Hainuwele myth especially significant is its connection to agriculture. Many scholars classify it as a tuber origin myth. because it explains the creation of important root crops that became staples of daily life. In many ways, Hainuwele's story serves the same purpose that grain myths serve elsewhere in the world. Food is something humanity depends upon every single day. Ancient societies often ask difficult questions. Where did our food come from? Why do crops grow from the earth? Why must living things die for other living things to survive? The Hainuwele myth offers answers to these questions, but those answers come through tragedy. Because before Hainuwele becomes a source of life, she must first become a victim of death. And her story begins with a man named Ameda. Ameda belonged to one of the original 9 families of the Western Saram people. According to tradition, these families emerged from bananas, a detail that immediately signals that we are entering the realm of sacred myth rather than ordinary history. One day, while hunting, Ameda encountered something unusual. A wild boar had become entangled with a coconut. The coconut was caught in one of the animal's tusks. Finding the object strange and intriguing, Ameda took it home with him. That night, a mysterious figure appeared to him in a dream. Dreams frequently play important roles in mythology. They act as bridges between the human world and the divine realm. Gods, spirits, ancestors, and supernatural beings often communicate through dreams, because dreams occupy a liminal space between reality and the unknown. The figure instructed Ameda to plant the coconut. When he awoke, Ameda followed the instructions exactly. Within only a few days, the coconut sprouted into a magnificent tree. It grew rapidly, far faster than any ordinary tree should. Soon it produced blossoms, and Ameda climbed upward to harvest sap from its flowers. But fate had another plan. As he worked among the blossoms, he accidentally cut his finger. A single drop of blood fell onto one of the flowers, then another. Then another. At the time, the accident seemed insignificant. Yet that blood would transform everything. Because 9 days later, when Ameda returned, the blossom was gone. And in its place sat a child. A girl born from a flower touched by blood. A girl unlike any human being the world had ever seen. When Ameda climbed the tree and discovered the child, he must have been astonished. According to the story, the girl appeared fully formed and alive. She was not an infant in the conventional sense, but a miraculous being created through supernatural means. Ameda named her Hainuwele. The name is commonly translated as coconut branch. It connected her forever to the tree from which she emerged. To modern listeners, this birth story may sound unusual, but miraculous births are a common feature in mythology around the world. Heroes emerge from stones, gods are born from flowers, and sacred figures arrive through impossible circumstances. Such births often signal that the individual possesses a destiny beyond ordinary human life. Hainuwele was no exception. Ameda wrapped the child in a sarong and brought her home. There, she grew with astonishing speed. Days seemed to accomplish what years normally would. Before long, she had matured into a beautiful young woman, but her most extraordinary trait was still waiting to reveal itself. Because Hainuwele possessed a gift unlike any other. A gift that would make her father wealthy. A gift that would inspire awe, and eventually, a gift that would lead directly to her destruction. Some blessings attract admiration, others attract envy, and envy has destroyed countless heroes throughout mythology. Hainuwele was about to learn that lesson firsthand. As Hainuwele grew into a young woman, it became clear that she was unlike anyone else in the village. She possessed a miraculous gift. Whenever she relieved herself, valuable objects appeared instead of waste. Gold ornaments, coral, porcelain, jewelry, objects of wealth and beauty. Items that were rare and difficult to obtain suddenly appeared effortlessly through Hainuwele. To modern listeners, the image may seem strange or even humorous at first. Yet, in mythological traditions, bodily functions often symbolize creation, fertility, and the transformation of raw materials into something valuable. Hainuwele's gift represented abundance in its purest form. Ameda quickly discovered the advantages of his daughter's ability. The treasures she produced made him wealthy beyond anything he had previously imagined. Goods that once required long journeys and trade networks now appeared almost magically within his own household. Soon, Ameda's status began to rise. People noticed. Neighbors became curious. Questions were asked. How had Ameda become so prosperous? Where were these riches coming from? Why did fortune seem to follow Hainuwele wherever she went? At first, curiosity dominated people's thoughts, but curiosity rarely remains alone for long. Eventually it is joined by suspicion, and suspicion often invites envy. The villagers watched. They speculated, and slowly, admiration began to transform into resentment. Because while everyone enjoys receiving gifts, few people are comfortable witnessing someone possess a power they cannot understand. One of the most important events within the community was a ceremonial dance that lasted for 9 consecutive nights. These celebrations brought people together and reinforced social bonds throughout the village. Music echoed through the darkness while dancers moved in circles beneath the stars. According to custom, young women participating in the dance would present areca nuts to the men. Areca nuts held social and ceremonial importance throughout many parts of Southeast Asia. Offering them was a gesture of participation and goodwill within the festivities. When Hainuwele joined the celebration, however, she did something extraordinary. Instead of offering ordinary areca nuts, she distributed treasures. On the first night, people were delighted. Who wouldn't be? Instead of receiving a simple nut, they received valuable gifts. Jewelry, rare ornaments, objects worth far more than anything expected. The recipients celebrated their good fortune. They praised Hainuwele. They admired her generosity. But as the nights continued, the gifts became larger, more valuable, more impossible. Each evening surpassed the one before. The villagers began asking uncomfortable questions. Where was she getting these things? How could one person possess such endless wealth? Was this truly a blessing, or was it something unnatural? What had once inspired gratitude now inspired fear. And fear has a remarkable ability to transform communities. People who had happily accepted Hainuwele's gifts now viewed her differently. She was no longer simply a young woman. She had become something strange, something unsettling, something they no longer understood. And history shows us repeatedly that people often fear what they cannot understand. By the 8th night, whispers had become conversations. Conversations had become plans. And plans had become something far darker. Before we continue tonight's story, I'd like to thank all of my witches and wanderers for joining me. Whether you're listening on Spotify, watching on YouTube, tuning in through iHeartRadio, or listening on Pandora, your support means more than I can express. Every listen, every rating, every comment, and every share helps this community continue to grow. If you're enjoying tonight's episode, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe on YouTube. And if you're listening on Spotify, don't forget to leave a rating for the show. It only takes a moment, but it helps more witches and wanderers discover these stories. Thank you all for being here. Now, let's return to the dance. The 9th night arrived, the final night of celebration, the final night of dancing. And unknown to Hainuwele, it would also be the final night of her life. Before the festivities began, the men secretly dug a pit in the center of the dance ground. The hole was carefully concealed, its purpose known only to those involved in the conspiracy. As dancing commenced, Hainuwele took her place among the participants, just as she had every night before. The circle moved, the drums played, voices sang into the darkness, and little by little, the dancers began pushing her inward. At first, the movement seemed natural, part of the dance, nothing unusual, but with every turn she was guided closer to the hidden pit. Closer, closer, until finally, she fell. The men immediately rushed forward. They shoveled earth into the pit. Hainuwele cried out. She begged for help, but her voice was drowned beneath songs and celebration. The dancers continued moving, the drums continued beating, and soil continued falling. Eventually, her cries stopped. The dancing continued. The villagers stomped the earth flat above her grave, and Hainuwele disappeared beneath the ground, buried alive by the very people who accepted her gifts. The same people who had smiled while receiving her generosity. The same people who had celebrated her abundance. Now they had silenced her forever, or so they believed. When Hainuwele failed to return home, Ameta became worried. He searched the village. He questioned the dancers. He followed every clue available to him. Eventually, he consulted an oracle. Through supernatural means, he learned the truth. His daughter had been murdered, buried beneath the dance ground. Ameta excavated her body, but what happened next transformed tragedy into creation. According to myth, he cut Hainuwele's corpse into pieces and buried those pieces throughout the land. From them grew various plants, most importantly tubers, food crops that would sustain future generations. Yams, roots, staples of life. The death of Hainuwele became the source of nourishment for humanity. This theme appears throughout many agricultural myths around the world. Life emerges from death. Sacrifice becomes fertility. Destruction becomes renewal. But the story was not finished yet. Ameta took Hainuwele's severed arms to Maluku Satine, the ruling deity over humankind. Satine was outraged by what had happened. In response, she created a spiral-shaped gate. All humans were ordered to pass through it. This became a test. Those capable of crossing remained human, though they became divided into two groups, the Patosiwa, the people of 9, and the Patalima, the people of 5. Those who failed the crossing experienced a different fate. Some became animals, others became spirits, others became beings that existed somewhere between worlds. Afterward, Maluku Satine departed from the world of the living. She became the ruler of the realm of the dead, and humanity was forever changed. Through Hainuwele's death came food. Through her death came social divisions. Through her death came the separation between the living and the dead. The entire structure of existence was reshaped because one extraordinary girl was feared for her gifts. The story of Hainuwele is one of the most powerful myths we've explored on this podcast. It is a story about generosity and jealousy, about abundance and fear, about death and rebirth. And perhaps most importantly, it reminds us that communities often struggle with those who are different. Throughout history, extraordinary individuals have frequently been celebrated one moment and condemned the next. Hainuwele's tragedy reflects that reality. Yet even in death, she became a source of life. Her story continues to survive centuries after it was first told. And like the plants that grew from her body, her legacy continues to flourish. Thank you for joining me for another episode of the Morbid Witch Podcast. Thank you to all my witches and wanderers for your continued support. If you enjoyed tonight's episode, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe on YouTube. And if you're listening on Spotify, please leave a rating for the show. You can find the Morbid Witch Podcast on Spotify, YouTube, iHeartRadio, and Pandora. Until next time, stay strange, stay spooky, and remember, the shadows are always watching.